the Nature Center Committee that takes care of the Nature Center tours over here. One of the things we do year in, year out is get rid of some noxious weeds, largely Himalayan blackberry. We have some pros right here in our audience who are great at digging them out. But there's more than one noxious weed in our island, and they're a problem. And so we invited Melody Meyer here from the Harris County Noxious Weed Board, I believe the whole name is. And you may have met her this summer at the fair, but we learned there's a lot to what she has to give and instruct us about, and that another setting would be very helpful for us all. So we've invited her here today, and she has a lot to tell us. So please welcome Melody Meyer.
Thank you very much. Thank you guys for coming. Thanks for taking your time with us today, because this is an important topic and a lot of people kind of discount it. So our theme is no rest for the weedy. I want to thank Tom and Ed for inviting me here too. This is a really great venue to talk to people who garden and people who are concerned with their community open public spaces. So thank you guys for having me. Thank you for having me at your fair too. That was one of the best fairs I've been to in a long time. You guys at Fox Island know how to have a good time. So thank you. It was great. Next year, I want to have a booth here if you're re-invited, and I'm going to bring a field inspector to man the booth so I can go have fun. That's my plan. Ooh, I'm on camera. So, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of history about who we are and what we do and where we came from, and then I'll roll right into our terrible 10 noxious weeds. We've got a couple highlighted weeds that we're going to talk about that are particularly a problem in waterway areas such as Fox Island and the peninsula, and just what to be on the lookout for and what to do with it, whether it's on your property, and also how to educate our friends, our family, or other community members. So a little bit of history. 1881, before Washington was even a state, we were a territory. That was when our first noxious weed law happened. It was a misdemeanor if you had Canada thistle on your property. You got a $10 fine. That doesn't sound like very much today. I mean, you can't even eat out for $10. However, in 1881, I did a little bit of homework. Your average farmer's annual income on the low end was $120 a year, $120 a year, $240. It kind of ranged in there. So when you think about a $10 fine, if you only made $120 that year, that's like losing a month's wages today for a week. Boo to 1881. Yay to 2019. We don't do it that way. 1969, 88 years later, RCW 1710 was established, and that established the Washington State Noxious Weed Control Board, and that's what put in place all of the county weed boards. So it was kind of a trickle-down effect. We are part of that, obviously. The nice thing about this, if you are really intrigued about the whole RCW 1710, I have this very informative but rather dry pamphlet here. It is page upon page upon page of what RCW 1710 really is. So, if you are so intrigued, you may feel free. All of this pamphlet literature that I've got up here, all free, and I encourage you to take one or more copies of everything that catches your eye, because it's really informative, and if you want to share it, take more than one or two. I'm happy to dole that out in the community, and it will be a good free-for-all after we're all done. And also, if you have any questions during the presentation, you can just ask me instead of trying to wait until the end. So that's a little bit about where we came from. So the noxious weed, that is the traditional term that's given by the State Weed Board. It's non-native plants. They're invasive, destructive, difficult to control. So what else do they do? Washington State Noxious Weed Board, they decide which plants are going to be on the list every year. They decide which ones are going to be enforced upon. So we have hundreds of noxious weeds. We only have 41 in Pierce County that are designated for enforcement. And a lot of that is because the designation depends on what's the level of threat, what is the abundance, and what's really going on with that weed. So, one of my examples here, I'm just going to pass this around and you can look at it. You can see on the east side, Scotch broom has less than 10 acres of Scotch broom per county. And over here, we have more than 1,000 infested acres per county. So obviously, we cannot designate enforcement on that weed along the entire west coast. It's taken over. It would be a giant burden on all landowners, private, public, any of us. It would be a big burden, big money burden. And even if Pierce County decided to take care of Scotch broom, look at all the other counties on that if they're not doing it, why would we do it? We would be kind of wasting our resources and your resources. So Class A's, eradication is required in every county in Washington state. Class B, that means we designate control on those that we think we can control seed spread. So tansy is a Class B designate. We do enforce on it because we believe that we can stop it at least from spreading. Are we going to eradicate it? Probably not. But we can at least help try to keep it down so it doesn't turn into the next Scotch broom. Class C means we recommend you control it. You being whoever, whether you're a government agency or whether you're a private landowner, we recommend you control it, but you're never going to get a letter from us saying, you got to do something about those blackberries. We're not going to do that to you because we know we can't do anything about them. They're too widespread. It would be too much of a burden. So that is how they decide what classification a noxious weed gets. I have a little piece of trivia. What class of, do you think buttercup is in? It's not classified. If you search the state noxious weed board site, buttercup's not even classified as noxious because some varieties of buttercup are native and it's just everywhere where it's wet. So not even listed. So why do we bother with noxious weeds? I'm not going to read this to you word for word. There's a lot of words on this. But you can see here in the big picture is public health and safety. You know, some of our weeds cause some really severe problems. Tansy causes irreversible liver damage to anybody that ingests it. Mostly livestock is who's at risk. But if it gets in our wheat crops and it gets ground up into the flour and bread becomes, affected by it, now we've got liver problems.
Isn't that tansy tea? Isn't that tansy tea that you can drink?
Not tansy ragwort. I'm sure you could make it and drink it. I wouldn't recommend it. Irreversible liver damage is never good. So that might be a different plant. There are over 3,000 different kinds of tansy. Tansy ragwort is what we enforce on. So I would take very high concern with any homeopathic remedies that you see or that are recommended to you. Really do your homework. Really do your homework. So public health and safety. The agricultural industry in Washington is huge. This is one of the reasons we bother. We're the second largest food producer in the nation. Our employment sector, over 124,000 jobs in the ag industry in Washington. So you can see how noxious weeds and infestations, they're going to affect that agriculture industry in a lot of ways that seem little, but when you have broken equipment and you have man hours, what happens to our grocery costs? They go up. Native plants and wildlife. This is of special concern to you guys because you have a beautiful environment over here. And so if we don't protect it, these invasives, these noxious, they get in, they outcompete the native plants. And when the native plants go away, the wildlife really suffers. I love this picture of the little deer laying in the grass. So I have seen places where weeds have taken completely over, they create a monoculture, that grass can't grow, and then our wildlife has nowhere to be. So that's a real thing when you're looking around and you see plants that may or may not be problematic. That's what you ask yourself. Is it outcompeting other native vegetation? And is it affecting the wildlife that is native to us that we want to protect? Those are your big questions. And of course, our recreational areas. If we like to birdwatch, if we like to hike, swim, camp, whatever it is that we do, fishing, weeds affect us. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of thinking you were going to go hiking and a trail is closed. I've had that experience. Because they have to shut it down. It's either not passable or it's dangerous because of what's growing there. And because of resources, that agency, U.S. Forest Service, DNR, whoever it is, if they don't have volunteers, they may not have the ability to clean that up. So we have, there's some further slides too, but we have, just as individuals walking around, going on our hikes, taking care of our open spaces, there are little things that we can do that have a big impact on our recreational areas. And I'll talk to you guys more about that. This brings us into our terrible 10. How many of these weeds do you guys recognize? I know they're not great pictures, they're all crammed together. It's like a vision test. Couple of them, anybody recognize a couple of them?
Cinder bottom.
Okay, center bottoms, spotted knapweed.
I think the square one that has kind of wider.
Yep,
than
common
that
fennel.
Giant hawkweed.
Common fennel is down in this square one.
Fennel is, okay.
And the square one is, yes, that is a piece. The one above that is a piece of, a little piece of giant hogweed bloom.
Right,
So
okay.
good eye. Okay. So tansy, that bottom picture with no flowers, that's your first year plant. It looks a little like kale, kind of a little crunchy. It stays compact, it stays low to the ground in its first year. This is the best time to get them out of the ground when you see them. Just pop them right out. Early in the morning, best time to get your weeds when they're still dew, especially in the summer, because the roots have kind of let loose in the soil and they'll pop much easier. This time of year, there's a lot of tansy rosettes. If you look around anywhere there's been tansy, there's a regrowth cycle going on right now because they're trying to like, it's an emergency, it's getting cold, we need to pop, we need to get going. So you'll see them. This is your second year plant that you see in bloom. And so, single plant, 150,000 seeds, can produce that many, and those seeds can remain viable in the ground for 15 years. So I haven't exactly figured out the algebraic equation for that, but that is a lot of plants over a long period of time if they all germinate from here to 2034, where, that's rough. From one plant. So, like I said, it's irreversible liver damage. It will grow in full to partial sun. It will grow in any soil type. I've dug it out of driveways with gravel, and I've dug it off of clay banks, and I've pulled it up out of lawns. It will grow anywhere.
Excuse me.
Yes?
Do you know if the native mammals recognize that as a poison?
Some of them do. Most of the time, they will not eat it unless they're really hungry. So where it's the biggest risk is in our hay crops. When we go to hay our fields, it gets mowed down, it gets ground up and baled up in the hay. And it's dried and the animals won't know it because it has been dispersed.
And is it the seeds or the leaves?
The seeds, the leaves, all of the plant.
All toxic.
Yes, toxic. So it does get confused. I've done a lot of U-turns for goat weed because on the roadway, when you're doing 40 miles an hour, they're yellow. They look a lot alike. If you're confused about what kind of tansy you're looking at, count the petals. Button tansy has none. You can see it's just little buttons. Goatweed has 5 petals. Tansy ragwort, the one that is designated for enforcement, that has 13 petals. So just don't forget, irreversible liver damage. So you're going to hear me say this a lot. I'll try to cut it down. The most effective control is prevention. That's true of every noxious weed. Any weed that you don't want on your property, it's a prevention thing. So if you see one and you don't like it, get it out of there. Bag it up, get it in the trash. If your plants are flowering, and this also goes for any weed, get them either dug up or cut, and then bag them immediately and they go in the trash. If you never want to see it again, don't compost it. Because if the compost doesn't get hot enough to kill the seeds, you're just redistributing. Yes?
I just spent 3 hours shocked to discover that we had Scotch broom out here. And so I pulled about 120 of them out, just the grass out here.
Wow.
This is all new. This was, grass was put in just 2 years ago. And they have a root that's like a carrot. It's a real deep, long root.
Yes.
What I was worried about is we piled them up here, and then yesterday we had a work party here, and we burned them. Is burning these things a good idea or a bad idea in terms of trying to prevent propagation?
Tansy you can burn, but you want to make sure that your burn pile is really cleaned up, and if you burn it completely, because if you don't, now you've got a little tansy bed, and heat will hypergerminate the seeds. With Scotch broom, if you're going to burn it, don't burn it if it's got seed pods on it. I'm guessing these were little plants that didn't have seed pods.
Correct.
That's fine. You don't want to burn it if it's got seed pods because heat actually makes them pop and they can go 15 to 20 feet away and they plant themselves. Not just weeds are troublemakers. I mean, they find a way. They are the criminals of the plant world. So hand pulling is really effective for tansy. But so let's pretend this guy pulls all this tansy and says, gosh, I'm really busy the next 3 days. I'll come back and bag it up then. He's going to find out that that's completely gone to seed. It's put itself into emergency mode, and now you're going to have that fuzzy dandelion look. I'm going to skip forward here. There you go. That's what it's going to look like in 2 or 3 days. And it's going to be really hard to handle because as you even rustle it, they float everywhere. You're nodding like maybe you've had that experience. So you want to bag those immediately as you're pulling them. Just save yourself the work. You're already doing the work, bag them right now. This time of year in the fall, these are the things that you want to look for. There's a lot of plants at seed set, not just tansy, a lot of different kinds of plants. And there's a lot of new growth and rosettes. If you've mowed your tansy, it will pop back up. It will re-sprout from the root, and it will grow a whole new plant in that same place from that taproot. So those are, this time of year, this is what you want to look for. If you have plants at seed set, your best bet is to take your bag, big contractor bag, gently put it over the top, pinch it, clip it, and keep it in that bag. But be careful, if you've got a big thicket of it, it's pretty hard not to drop seeds.
But the root comes out, if you're patient.
Yes, the root will come out. When they're at seed set, though, you want to clip first and then get your root, because you go to wiggle that plant, you've just replanted inadvertently. So really special handling with that. Okay, knapweeds. Now, knock on wood, I haven't seen any of those over here. And I was here this summer in knapweed season. But if you drive around the city of Tacoma, the port of Tacoma, in the industrial areas, you'll see a lot of this. It'll grow out of the cracks of sidewalks. It will grow on busy roads, popping right out of the curbs. And then what happens is you drive through there. Let's say you go over to the RV center in Fife to have your vehicle maintenance, and they park it in their back lot where there's knapweed. Or you even drive it down Pacific Highway where there is knapweed. You've picked up seeds and you can bring them right here to Fox Island. It's that easy to transport these seeds. So, knock on wood, we haven't seen them over here yet. Take precautions. Try not to park your vehicles where you see really weedy areas on the sidewalk, because that's a #1 vector for moving seeds around. So this plant, there's a rosette, little baby plant. This is what it looks like when it's in full bloom. And you see on those flower heads, it's got the bracts, which means it will stick to you. So even if you're out hiking or walking down the sidewalk, city of Tacoma, you can pick that plant up really easy. They hitchhike great. Got little tiny bracts all around it that just stick like Velcro. So it's a class B. We do enforce control on that one. And it will create monocultures and just take over. There's a couple different kinds of knapweed in this area. I've only seen diffuse knapweed one time ever. Meadow knapweed likes rural areas and it likes forested areas, so this is one to be on the lookout for. It looks a little like bachelor button. It really likes wet, moist soils, and like I said, spotted knapweed, you don't really need to pH test your soil. It will grow in the cracks of sidewalks. It doesn't care at all. The reason we control these, wildlife habitat and plant diversity, they create monocultures. I don't have it on this presentation. I've got a place, a vacant lot in the Port of Tacoma that the whole 2 acres has been completely taken over in a short 3 years. So there's nothing else growing there, it's all knapweed, and we're really working hard to get it cleaned up because it is a problem. Fortunately, it's in a very low traffic area and it's kind of isolated.
To follow up on my point, but yeah, I see people around just taking a torch and burning weeds just in general. Is that a good way to eliminate them?
It eliminates them for right now. If it doesn't kill the root, you may have resprouts. It'll take care of the foliage and it may stop it from flowering, which is good, because if it doesn't flower, you've got less seeds. But it's questionable, just depends on if you kill that root. If you kill the root, you're golden. And I don't know a lot about that, how much that affects the root.
We've got one
per
for
plant.
sale if you want.
A weed burner?
I don't think it works very well.
No?
It's hard to burn through soil.
Right, so yeah, getting to the root is always your issue. So the other thing too is they're a wildfire hazard, which is where they're problematic, because if you get a big monoculture and that field catches, it's a very dry plant material on the outside, and the inside it's got kind of an oily resin, so they catch quickly, and they also create soil erosion, so you don't want them on the banks.
Well, what I have on here is a bunch of weeds in this gravel parking lot,
Yeah,
and it's hard to dig into roots and things in there, so I was thinking about just
yeah.
torching them.
Give it a try. Yeah. I mean, it's not, you're not going to have any long-term damage from it. It's a driveway. So I say give it a try and see what happens. I mean, and it's obvious you can't revegetate. If it's a pasture, I'll tell you, heavily reseed, but you don't want to reseed your driveway. So give it a try. So again, it's prevention. Prevent seed production. That's always the answer for weeds. Prevent them. You can dig, pull, and cut this weed. You want to try to get the taproot. Again, collected bag flowering parts. You don't want those traveling. If this gets established on a piece of property, any of the knapweeds, you're going to need integrated pest management. That's the fancy word for everything you can think of. Whether you burn it, you cut it, you dig it, you pull it, or you poison it. And whatever it is, it's going to take a combo of efforts. So they have released some biocontrol agents on spotted knapweed in the Port of Tacoma. The jury's still out because we need to see over years what happens. And I think their last release was in 2016, and they were talking about it this season. I don't know if it happened. The jury's out. We don't know if the weevils are working on that. So here's some pictures. The diffuse knapweed is very spindly. Meadow knapweed gets bushy. That's the one that likes rural areas and wet areas. So that's the one that if you were going to really worry about your trails over here, you would worry about meadow knapweed. And it is pretty profuse out in the Eatonville area and Graham, Roy. It likes those kind of farmland / forested areas. So be on the lookout for that. Poison hemlock. Has everybody here seen poison hemlock in life? Okay, good. And you've had some over here?
We have some growing right on 9th.
Okay, so I have, what did I do with it? I don't have poison hemlock. It gets commonly mistaken for wild carrot. This is a domestic carrot that went to seed. I pulled this one out of my garden. Nope, this is the domestic carrot that I pulled out of my garden. These two are wild carrot, and I'll pass those around. If you look at them, all of them have hairy stems. Poison hemlock has this really smooth stem with the red blotches. It also has hollow stems, and wild carrot has solid stems. You break them and they're like a stick. They get confused because they're in the carrot family, and when you pull wild poison hemlock, it smells like a carrot. The flowers, when it flowers, it's got 5 petals. They're very small and white. When it goes to seed, they drop like a baby powder. So this is our previous outreach and education coordinator. She is about 5'4", standing in that thicket of poison hemlock. So you can see how tall that is. Your key identifier with it is those purple splotches. You'll see on that wild carrot and the domestic carrot, there's no purple splotches, and it's hairy. So be looking for those purple splotches on plants. They say on here can reach 8 feet, but I'll tell you that I've seen it 10 to 12 feet tall. Every part of the plant's poisonous. If you chop it down, bag it up, and get rid of it immediately, do not burn it. It causes toxic fumes. Never burn poison hemlock. Very toxic fumes. Poison Control Center, 40+ calls a year on that for poisonings and accidental ingestion because people dig it up when it's young thinking it's wild carrot or Queen Anne's lace. And Queen Anne's lace, just got done blooming, and there's still some blooming out there. That's what you're seeing right now. Poison hemlock is an early bloomer. Usually May, by June it's done. But you will see some regrowth. So see the little parsley looking plant? That's your baby poison hemlock. Very easy to confuse.
So does that smooth stem with the purple blotches show up early in the life of the...
Yes. So even this little plant, not a great picture, but if you pull that out of the ground, you can see there's little tiny purple, and they grow and they stretch as it gets bigger. But yes, and that's a great question. You can see it early on. So again, don't leave it sitting if you cut it. I was house sitting for a friend of mine, and I was cutting down some in her yard because I said, hey, do you know you have this? And she's like, no, I just thought it was pretty. Yeah, well, you got the wrong person house sitting for you now. Because I'm going to go out there and cut it down. And I cut it down, and it was big. It had big stems, and it was a good 12 feet tall. And I threw it down, and then here comes the German Shepherd, like, oh, she cut me a stick. And I'm chasing the shepherd to keep him away from it and realizing I'm going to have to bag this up immediately because he thinks it's a toy. Every part is toxic. But they stay toxic up to 3 years, so be aware of that. Mechanical is really effective control. If you can get it by the tap rate, you probably won't see it again. Don't let it flower. Don't let it go to seed. If it flowers, cut the flower heads off, which means you're standing here, it's really tall, you're cutting carefully, you're wearing a dust mask so that those seeds and flowers aren't dropping pollen on you because even that is poisonous. And then you're bagging it up, and then you're pulling that taproot out of the ground. So that order is pretty important. Again, please let me reiterate, don't burn it, don't compost it. Seal it up in the trash, throw it away. If you never want to see a plant again, it never goes in the compost, it only goes in the trash. So here's our Queen Anne's lace, and here's our poison hemlock, and you can see that hairy stem, and in the bags, that hairy stem that's your biggest one. And they're even irritating to touch, the wild carrot. The poison hemlock is very smooth, very tricky, feels very nice. It's not nice. They say that those red splotches are symbolic of Socrates' blood. They had him drink the hemlock. So this is what they'll look like right now. If we've got regrowth, which they do sometimes pop up in the fall, they look like a fern. They're very tricky. It's a very tricky plant. These are the criminals of the plant world we're talking about. So look low. Your regrowth is going to be low to the ground. And who knows if this is regrowth or if this is new growth. Seeds may have dropped. It may have sprouted. It pulls us into giant hogweed, which has the flowers are almost identical to poison hemlock, except you can see this lady is holding just like this, and you can see the size of her face, and she's a normal-sized human being, and holding that flower that's this big around in comparison. It's huge. So that's your key difference with poison hemlock. It grows up, it gets some that come off of the stem ends, but it's not a big umbel like that. So they're huge. This is your key identifier. They also have purple splotches, but they're huge. So flower heads are usually at maturity 2.5 feet across. Leaves are usually 5 feet in breadth at full growth, and they are 15 to 20 feet tall. You can't miss it because you just drive by it and it looks like something that doesn't belong there. And it's an escaped ornamental from England, so we can thank England for this. Somebody missed it and they had it brought over. So, usually blooms in June. It's usually done by July, although we had a call on it in Fife. Down in a wet, swampy drainage area, there was a big thicket of it. So, it is a Class A, and eradication is required throughout the state, any county that has it. And the difference in the words eradication and control means we need to prevent that thing from setting seed and dropping the seeds. Eradication means we have to get rid of all evidence of the plant. When we come back, we need to see that there's no, it was never here, doesn't even. So those words are important. Where it says control is required, you've got to just stop it from setting seed. Where eradication is required, it's got to go. Okay, how do you guys like this one? There's your slide. This is the most animated slide you're going to have. I like this warning slide. This is my creation. Some people do not like yucky pictures, and my next slide has some pictures. If you have a medical background, it won't offend you. If you have a tough stomach, it won't offend you. But if you don't like blisters, you won't like the next one. So you may feel free to play on your phones or look at the sky, whatever you want to do. You don't have to be subjected to this.
Oh, yeah.
See, there you go. I knew it. Okay, minute amounts of sap in your eyes can lead to temporary or permanent blindness. The problem with this plant is when you go to cut it with that big old stem that it's got, or you walk through it and crunch it down, the sap can shoot out 5 feet from the plant. I mean, it's just pulsing just like blood through a vein. So, clear watery sap, it causes phytophotodermatitis, which just means that the sap gets on your skin and you don't feel anything. It's just like pouring water on your skin. It's not a big deal. And I know, because I've had the sap touch me and I completely lost my mind. I was not calm and happy like right now. I immediately took the precautions. So it touches your skin and nothing happens. It doesn't burn, it doesn't tingle, you don't feel anything. It just feels like watery. Ugh. And so if you don't know what's going on, you would just keep digging and go, whatever, I'll deal with it later. Those UV rays from the sun are having a chemical reaction with your skin. And within 48 hours, you're going to start blistering. Now, this is the mildest blister picture I have, because I don't like the blister pictures. I'm a former medical worker. I'm kind of done with that. The guy, the legs down here, those are the scars from the blisters. So that lasts a long time. Here's the thing, it's the gift that keeps on giving. For the next 7 to 10 years, every time that you're in the sunlight, you might blister all over again in that same area. So, yeah. So we really want to do prevention on this one.
We have that in our area.
We do, yeah. We do have, I think that this year, I think we sent out 30 notices. Now, when you think about 30 notices throughout all of Pierce County, or when we send notices, that also means sometimes we're digging them up ourselves. When you think about that, we've probably had 300 notices go out on poison hemlock and 600 notices go out on tansy. 30 is not a real big number, so it's not too bad. But eradication is required. We're still convinced we can completely eradicate this plant. These guys are doing it right. So if you have to handle giant hogweed, dress very similar. You want non-porous clothing. Wear your rain gear, full rain gear, and then rinse it off after you're done. Masks, shields, eye protection, gloves, boots, long pants. Don't go, there's a video, you can look it up on YouTube, and it's from the UK, and he's got that great British accent. I love that accent. And he talks about, don't be frolicking in the hogweed. And it's just hilarious, because I look at that plant, and it doesn't make me want to frolic. It makes me want to go away. So if you are exposed to the sap, wash that area thoroughly with cold water and soap. I say cold water because you don't want warm water. It opens the pores of your skin. So cold water, get that off. And you don't need to abrade your skin. Just keep it rinsing like you would with a chemical spill. You do not want to abrade your skin and open up those pores. So just know that. Take your precautions if you run into giant hogweed. It's a bad actor. That's a baby. So you can see that next to that tree. So if I was standing next to that, it would be about here. And that's a baby. It's only maybe 2 months old. So that's just when it's really young.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
You said just put it in the garbage. What do they do with that?
It goes to the landfill.
And so does it freeze rot in the landfill?
No, because you're going to bag it up. All noxious weeds need to be bagged. So, and it's going to get buried. They don't flatten it out, so it's so buried that we'll never see it again in the landfill. Yeah,
At the
that's a
Purdy-
good question.
At the Purdy transfer station, they've gotten a little bit sharper, but still they say if you've got a part of your wagon or a barrel that has mostly blackberries in it or broom, they say, oh, put that up top with the garbage.
Yes, it does go in the garbage section. It never goes in the compost
It's not,
because they don't want it.
it's not bagged up there. They just scoop it
No,
up.
they're not making me bag it. Interesting. With the noxious ones, probably because they're not designated for enforcement. That would be my guess. The ones that we have, if you tell them I have noxious weeds and they ask, are they designated for enforcement? Hogweed, poison hemlock, tansy, those are.
They should be here listening to you.
They should be. They should be because really even those plants, we don't want them loose, running loose. However, they're going to bury them. That's the truth about that. They're probably not going to get a lot of sunlight or nutrients. Would be my guess. Not good nutrients would be my guess. So control on giant hogweed. Early spring when the plants are little, dig it up, get rid of it. For larger areas, you can repeat mow. That will take the energy away from the plant itself because the roots, instead of them getting a big plant that gets to flower, if you continually mow it, what happens, and again, be in your gear, even if you're mowing these young plants because they have the sap. But as you're mowing and continuously mowing, they're losing their energy because the root's putting all its energy into just trying to make the plant happen so they never go flower and drop seeds. Glyphosate's a touchy issue. I already know. This is just that so far has been the most widely used poison. If you need to use something really toxic on it, that's what they recommend. Do I use it on my property? I do not. That's all I'm going to say about that. So, we have a native here called cow parsnip. It looks a lot like giant hogweed. It gets 5 to 7 feet tall, and you can see the flowers are pretty similar. But that flower head on that cow parsnip is only about this big, maybe a medium-sized dinner plate. Giant hogweed, remember, that flower is 2.5 feet. That's huge. And there's a comparison of the cow parsnip leaf and the giant hogweed leaf. Parsnip, no purple splotches. Giant hogweed, purple splotches. So, kinda, if you don't take away anything else, just remember, plants with purple splotches, they're bad. Leave them alone. Anybody seen gorse? Okay, very good. I've only seen it a couple times in person. I found it on accident when I was an inspector. I can tell you those thorns will go right through a pair of Carhartt pants. It is a mean plant. It has a bad attitude. They get confused with Scotch broom. You can see why. The flowers look really similar. But they have thorns on them that are easily visible if you actually look at the plant and don't just walk through it like I did. They're really aggressive. They're very invasive. Older plants get a really dense center of dead, dry material. And why is that a problem? Well, okay. Why is that a problem? There we go. High oil content in those plants plus that dead material. You get a big thicket like this and it gets caught on fire and you've got a really big issue. So gorse seeds remain viable for up to 30 years in the ground. We don't want it going to seed. If you've got it, dig it out. Get rid of it as quickly as you can. Don't let it flower. So, like always, get it before it flowers. Multiple cuttings. If you have a big field of it, again, you can mow it. You can keep cutting it. that will help reduce the plant energy. If you have a room this size, that area that's full of gorse, it's going to be pretty hard to dig it up plant by plant. You can use a weed wrench on it, and we have a weed wrench program. I'll tell you more about that. But combinations. This is another weed where integrated pest management is really a great thing. So you can see how similar they look. But when you get up close and you see those thorns, you know you've got gorse. And it does like coastal areas. If you go out to ocean shores in Grayland, you'll see gorse everywhere. And here's the trick. The people that are living out there, most of them don't even know what it is. Because I walked around, we did a little trip out there to Grayland, and I just would say, gosh, what are those pretty yellow plants? And I've seen them. They have thorns on them. And the shopkeepers and the pedestrians are like, I don't know, it's Scotch broom. It's kind of a pain. And I didn't say who I was or where I'm from, because I'm not in your county. But I just wanted to know, are people aware? Nobody knew that was gorse. Nobody knew, not one person. And finally, the friend that I was traveling with says, could you knock it off? Leave those poor people. Stop quizzing the people. So shiny geranium, this is one that really exploded in University Place the last couple of years, and still a ton. So of course, we're in a watery area. This is an issue because it really likes shady spots and it likes forested land. So unfortunately, your trails over there would be at high risk for this plant. It invades forest floors, it takes over. And it takes over really fast. I saw a yard where there was maybe a 20 square foot patch the first year, and then the next year the whole yard was overrun with it. And the homeowner was really upset. They had renters in there, and they asked them to deal with the weeds, and the next year they came back and weeds hadn't been dealt with, and it was completely infested. So the flowers are pink, they have 5 petals. This has a succulent appearance. It's a very waxy plant. It's very pretty, actually. And it's got rounded leaves. So when you're looking at it, and it's really often confused with Herb Robert. Anybody know what the nickname for Herb Robert is? Stinky Bob? Anybody seen that plant? I'll show you here in a minute. So this is how it takes over. It spreads by seed. And when you walk through this little area right here, as you're walking, you're disturbing those plants. They're popping seeds out. They just eject them forcefully. And so they will be all over. If your pants are cuffed, you've just brought them home. Or your shoelaces, or your little tags on hiking boots. Let's see how good my yoga is, or not. This little tag right here, I'm constantly cleaning that out and making sure there's nothing in there, because that is a #1 seed transport. In bad areas when I'm working, I actually take duct tape and wrap it all the way around that, because it gets tedious picking seeds out of there. So this sprouts during the fall, and it can go all winter long. And it just kind of thrives. It really likes moist, it really likes shade. This says that it will grow in partial to full sun. I've never seen it in full sun. Just saying, I'm not arguing with the slide, but I've never seen it. Prevention. If you're in the area with shiny geranium, clean off everything that you had in there. Your walking stick, your whatever. Try not to traipse through it if you can avoid it. If it's off trail, stay on the trail. You can heavily mulch it to control it. You can hand pull small patches. You can hoe or cultivate, but you've got to get rid of those plants when you pull them out of the ground. Don't leave them there, because they'll just set back in. Large patches can be chemically treated if you feel the need to do that. Again, just stop those seeds from spreading. So here's your shiny geranium and your Herb Robert. And this slide turned around again on me. So your titles are actually crossed. Shiny geranium, nope, it stayed, never mind, ignore that. Shiny geranium has your pointy leaves. And no, it did cross. It crossed, I'm sorry. So shiny geranium is right directly diagonal. It's got round leaves. Herb Robert has those triangular leaves. Herb Robert is hairy, and it smells bad if you walk through it. You cannot mistake it. because you'll walk through there and go, oh, what is that? It smells almost like something died. Shiny geranium has no smell, it has no hair, and it just looks really peaceful and pretty. There were some people that I stopped and talked to them because they had it growing in planters on their porches. They transplanted it where they had seen it on the roadside. It's in silicon, and I was like, oh, no, please don't do that. Bad stuff. So at least those two turned out right. Okay, these are just be on the lookouts. You probably won't see these, but I hope that that stays true. Goat's rue is a Class A. Eradication is required everywhere. We only have one spot of it in the Port of Tacoma. We only knew about it because that company, who is a locked and gated industry down right on the water, their maintenance people said to them, you got to call the Noxious Weed Control Board. You got a really bad plant down there. This is the only place in Pierce County we've seen this plant. But it is right on the waterway. It is right on the shoreline. So this is a thing where, because some of us are boat people, and if we go over into Tacoma, these seeds, they can be picked up in the waterways. So you want to watch for goat's rue. It's fatal if it's ingested by anybody or anything. The name goat's rue came because they shipped it over here in the 1800s thinking it would be great livestock foraging, and it turns out that it killed all their animals. So it's goat's rue. So, you want to be on the lookout for that. It is a Class A. Here's another one. We only have it in one place in Pierce County. It's in Roy. We started out, I want to say 2013, and there were like 20 plants on this property. And the homeowner actually called and said, I have this plant, and this is what I think it is, and I want it gone, but I don't know what to do about it. We sent an inspector out, and they said, oh yeah, you really do have that. They kept it contained. They got rid of it. This year, the inspector said they only have 3 plants left on the property. So that's a great thing. And it gets about 4 feet tall. It's kind of waxy. They used to use it to make a purple dye. And it stinks really bad. The people, 1700s, they had whole villages of dyers. So dyers woad, that name comes from the dyers had their own villages and communities because their arms and hands were permanently stained with the purple from processing it. And they also stunk because that smell seeped into their skin. So they kind of became their own community. If royalty was traveling through the area, they would demand that dyeing stop the week before traveling. So there's a little piece of interesting history on it. But we only have it in one place. So if you see this, please call us.
It didn't kill them.
It didn't kill them. It just stinks. And it's yucky. So, and it's very invasive. We don't want it here. Any of these that we're talking about, it's not, just a thing where, well, it's ugly or it doesn't smell good. It causes some kind of destruction. If we've enforced control on it, it's because it causes some kind of a problem or multiple. I'm just going to touch on common fennel really quickly. Anybody ever grow bulbing fennel? Okay. All right. If you have an herb garden and you want fennel, do not grow common fennel. It will take over. You will fight it. If you have buried cables, if you have running water, which most of us have, so you've got pipes underground, it's going to affect those things if it comes near it. Common fennel gets 8 to 10 feet tall. The taproot can get as long as the plant is tall, and it gets really thick, and it destroys everything. I have a place in Tacoma where I'm actually going to go take a picture where it's buckled the sidewalk, where the roots have come up, and it's like, well, the city of Tacoma is not going to be happy about that because it's a big buckle. Like, you can't safely walk over it. If you have any kind of mobility issues, you're probably going to want to walk on the street. It's safer. So, if you go to the nursery, buy bulbing fennel, and here's the sad part. You can get common fennel in the nursery sometimes. So, you just want to know that they don't always know what they're selling. Sadly, you would think that they would. Sometimes they don't. I'm going to say that sometimes they don't know. I don't want to say they don't care, because I'm hoping they just don't know. But I actually made a phone call to a nursery and said, the guy told me, no, I bought this in a nursery. I said, no, that's not possible. And he gave me the number. I called him and said, hey, do you have some common fennel? And they said, oh, we have lots. I said, okay, I'm with the Pierce County Noxious Weed Control Board. We got a top. And he went, oh, because he did know. Yes.
How do you eradicate the common fennel?
Dig it up, get as much of the taproot as you can, and then watch it for resprouts and just keep pulling it when you see it pop back up, because you're probably not going to get that 10 or 12 foot root.
No.
So, but if you can get it when it's a seedling, get it young. Get it young. Because when they're seedlings, they're only, they're little and they're easy to get. Try not to wait until it's 8 to 10 feet tall, because it's really difficult. So, and it drops thousands of seeds per plant. I can't even find a number because nobody has one. So these are the weeds of special concern. These are what you asked about, and that we don't enforce on these. I take that back. We do enforce on a couple of these. The two big special concerns ones we don't: English, holly, and knotweeds. So those are coming up. And we don't enforce, but we're going to really encourage you to control them if you have them. Wild chervil, if you have it, control is required. It has been in the peninsula area. I don't think we've ever had it on Fox Island. I don't know that for sure. I'm also the data entry person, and I didn't see it this year come up. Hollow stems, shiny green. These flowers, again, are a lot like poison hemlock and wild carrot. It's a prolific seed producer. Here's our pasture completely overtaken by it. So you can see why it's a problem. It can be grazed, but if you're trying to have nice pasture, you probably don't want all of that in there. It's got aggressive growth habits. It quickly becomes a monoculture, and it's really adaptable. So whether you have dry soil, wet soil, it'll grow. So you want to control on that. It's really an aggressive competitor, and that's how it outdoes the other plants. The grasses can't grow because it gets all the light. It shades out the lower plants, and it sucks up all the water and nutrients in the soil around it. The good news is this time of year, you probably won't even see skeletons of it because it blooms pretty early. We're done with it by May. So this is a Thurston County picture of a road crew doing eradication work on it, and you can see that that looks really labor intensive. So if you see it sprout up, get it immediately. That way you don't have to do this. You can mow it before it produces seed, and then mow it weekly. And also, if you hoe and cultivate and reseed really heavily with whatever you want growing there, that's going to help you outcompete that plant. You can spot spray it if you want to. Big thing, in any area, don't leave bare ground. Replant with desirable vegetation. Replant, replant, replant. Now, in the driveway, where we're having an issue, you can't replant. But anywhere out in your yard, your landscape areas, replant with something that's hardy, that will outcompete those weeds. So here we have our blooms on a wild chervil, which is what we control on it, and a burr chervil. And if you're driving down the street at 25 miles an hour, you can't tell the difference because you need a close-up. You need to get out and look at the actual flower. The burr chervil has all those little burrs on the flower, and the wild chervil is smooth. But you can see how similar those flowers all look. Very similar, so you kind of have to look at them. Perennial pepperweed, this is one that I have the option of taking this slide out, or this weed out, and I left it in because we've got a couple really big infestations in the Port of Tacoma. One of them's on the Theophos Waterway, which is a really common area for recreational boaters to be. So there is a chance you could pick up this plant really easily out on the waterways. And it's a profuse spreader. It's bushy, 1 to 3 feet tall. It's a class B. We do require control. And it spreads by prolific seed production and creeping roots. So root fragments also will grow this plant, a lot like knotweeds. You don't want it. It really outcompetes everything. You can see this shoreline. That's all perennial pepperweed. It's a summer to fall bloom. It's mostly in seed set now. Nesting habitat on the coast. That's who it really affects, and it creates huge destabilizing issues and soil erosion around your watershed areas. So you do not want this. If you have waterfront property, you don't want this. And it's a really pretty plant. But if you see it pop up, get rid of it immediately. It has a peppery smell when you pull it, and it is actually an edible. But again, I wouldn't grow it. Don't do it. It's bad. I found out this summer in a thicket just like this. Now, those plants are probably about 4 feet tall, so it's really thick and bushy. You have no visibility when you're walking in there. And I found out this summer, I don't consider myself an athlete for the most part, but I can run a lot further, faster, and longer than I thought, because I stepped on a nesting Canadian goose. Oh, I'm thinking of this. That was the day I was really happy to get back in the office. The office seemed like a much better place.
So the geese can manage a nest in the midst
The
of that?
geese love it. All of our other native, they don't want it. So it's a great, and they don't want us in there. So it's a great place to have Canadian geese if that's what you're looking for. Hey, like I said, it was a good day to get back in the office, and I usually really like being out in the field. So perennial pepperweed, prevent it. If it pops up, monitor your site and keep at it. It is grazable, as you can see, and so look at how tall it is just with our house in there and how thick that is. So control it, prevent it. Please don't collect it from the wild and think it's pretty and plant it, even in a planter. It's all bad. Did I skip here? English holly. We're going to pop into this. We don't control on it. You can take your whole yard, fill it up with English holly if you want. Don't cringe. But we would ask that you not do that because it's a bad plant. It too is a native habitat displacer. Other trees, wildlife, shrubbery, and wildlife is all affected if this is growing. So it can get 15 to 50 feet tall and up to 15 feet wide. I gotta take a drink of water before I just lose it. It can grow as a single tree or in a thicket. Leaves are thick and glossy. They're waxy. That means anytime you have a waxy plant, it's not a really good plant to try herbicides on, because that wax is its immune protection. It just drips off. So unless you're going to damage the plant first before you spray it, you're wasting your money. They usually have sharp spines. This is a variegated English holly. It can be all dark green or it can be variegated like this. Flowers are really small. I've actually never seen the flowers on a holly. I've seen the berries and I've seen just the vegetative plant. I have not seen the flowers. I'll be on the lookout for those. So here's a nice English holly. I don't even know if that's a tree or a thicket. I'm guessing it's a thicket. If it shows up on your property, get it when it's a small plant or a seedling, because it's way easier than once it's like this. So I left just the corner of the dead end sign over there, if you can see the little piece of the yellow triangle. So that gives you a height reference for that plant. Large plants, don't bother digging them up. They have really extensive roots. You're going to create a giant hole. I mean, if you want a giant hole, I guess dig it up. Maybe it could be a swimming pool next. But if you don't want that, don't do that. You're going to want to cut them down near the base and either paint on an herbicide or treat that root ball somehow. You don't want to dig it up, probably. Dispose of all the cuttings properly, branches and roots, because branches and roots will resprout. And you'll get new plants.
Excuse me.
Yes.
We have at Tom's we've done a holly blitz in the nature center. It was for the larger ones we couldn't yank. We drilled maybe 1/2 inch, 3/8 inch hole and poured glyphosate and then put a plastic bag over it. It seems to work.
Is it working?
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's so much better than, because if you think about everything that you disturb, if you were to dig that root ball up, you disturb everything around it, so you don't want to go there. So I'm glad to know that that's, because it's one of the recommendations.
Actually, it was crossbow. Is that glyphosate?
It has it in there, yes. It's a combo chemical. And I'm not well versed on chemicals, but I know that's a combo, and it's commonly used by DOT.
Somebody promised that it wouldn't go out into the soil from the roots. I don't know
It
if
won't.
that's true.
It will not. It will kill that theme and that's it. So, what happened to, I'm going to flip around here a little bit. I'm going to pop into knotweeds, but I think that there's another slide on holly, so just forgive me in advance. So this section is on identification, history, do's and don'ts, when, where, and how to control your knotweeds. So there's a really important part about that when and where, so just keep that in mind. It's a class B, it's a non-designated weed. We are never going to send you a letter that says, you got to deal with it. Because we can't, it's too widespread. It doesn't have enough of a threat level. As bad as it is, we cannot enforce on it. Round hollow canes, this is what they look like when they're babies. And as you can see, those little babies popping up around from that parent plant, they're growing out through root systems that are branching out, which is what the problem is with this plant. It can reproduce by seed, but mostly it's the roots. That big set of leaves is actually on a 4-door car, and that is the back and front window. So, for a size reference of how big those leaves can get, there are a multitude of kinds of knotweeds, but we deal with the Japanese and the Himalayan the most. I believe that's a Bohemian knotweed up top. Generally sets seed in mid-August. Knotweed control, its regenerative abilities are amazing. So you've got to work on it multiple seasons. You can't just say, we only do it in March. No, you want to do it more than that. If you have it on a waterway, start furthest upstream and work down. And you're looking at long-term attention to this, 3 to 5 years to eradicate a small patch. Integrated pest management, mechanical, chemical, and cultural all together are your best strategy. Cut, pull, mow, bend and spray. Does anybody know what bend and spray is? Bend and spray means at a certain time of year you bend the canes down because it makes the plant tired. Instead of flowering, it's like, oh, we got to straighten up this plant. And so the roots just put all their energy into trying to get that cane straight again. And it really tires the plant out. And you can do that before you cut or spray it, and it will really help knock down the effectiveness of the plant itself, because it makes it tired. So now we do's and don'ts. Do all of these things. I want to add too that we can make this a PDF and send it to you also. So just know that if you want this just in PDF form, that can be done.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, you bet. So use a wide variety of control methods. Pay careful attention to timing per method. I have on my references, which is right here, every reference that I refer to for building this presentation for you guys, all of my references are here. And one of these is King County Best Management Practices for Knotweed. It's about a 12-page PDF, but the timing is in that PDF for your knotweed control measures. And it's very intense. It would take 2 days to get through it all in this format, so I didn't torture you guys with that.
Yeah. It said inject the stem. Do you leave the stem intact and put a needle in? Or do you cut it off and squirt it down the stem?
Yeah, you can leave it intact and inject it in. So, and that's in that best management too. They give really specific. So there is a lot of information there. So you can cut the stems or bend them as close to the ground as possible, and then allow them to hang out for 2 to 4 weeks working on it. Just let that plant focus on straightening, because you're going to make those roots really tired. Anytime you're going to use chemicals, I have to say this is a law that applies to me. You must follow label directions. Please follow label directions. Do consider your timing, your rate, and your method really carefully, because sometimes if you cut them at the wrong time, it's just like pruning your apple tree where you make it healthier. So if you cut it too early, you've got regrowth, it will quickly reach full height. If you go too late in the season, it limits the ability to control next year's growth. So don't skip surveys. You know, every spring, every summer, every fall, every winter, be assessing that area and what is going on. Don't skip a season. If you go, well, we're out of town for 3 months, have somebody come check it out and do whatever you need to have done. It will cost you less in the long run to pay somebody to deal with it if you're gone for 3 months. So, if you're cut and pour, as far as the actual cutting and pouring down the stems, is wasteful with this plant because the stems are narrow and it takes way too much. You're much better off doing stem injection before late July and quit by the end of September if you're going to do stem injection. You can use cut and cover also, but if you use cut and cover, what that means is like fabric, plant fabric. If you're going to do cut and cover, you need to weight it down. You need to monitor to make sure those plants don't grow through. And it has to be weighted down so that no air gets to it, no water, and no sunlight. Because if it even puffs up with the wind, gets a little bit, that's all they need. They only need a little bit. Some more control information. Late August, early September is most effective if you're only doing one chemical treatment on a small patch. If you've got a large patch, you want to do all season long and multiple seasons. If you've got wetland or shoreline, check with the Department of Ecology because there's permits and paperwork, and you don't want to get into that hairball of chemicals in the water. So, spring treatments, not as efficient, but they're acceptable when land use or visibility issues say do this early. So if you've got knotweed growing out on your roadway where you're pulling out of your driveway, yes, we don't recommend cutting it right then, but if it's a visibility issue, we'd rather have you cut it and deal with the plant later than get T-boned coming out of your driveway. Okay. So, I really like this slide. It was fun to build. Especially for Fox Island, there's no rest for the weedy. It's fall, the weeds are gone, we can finally rest, right? Well, slow down, Trigger. Nope, it's not that way. Fall is our time that we need to consider, how did this summer go? How did the spring and summer go? How did our landscaping adventures turn out? Did we plant something that we didn't like and now it's everywhere? Did we have noxious weeds for the first time ever? Did we have our first experience with one of these weeds? And what are we going to do? Where did we have success? What worked really well? Where did we not have so much success? And what do we need to do? This is the good time to do that, to be thinking about that. So, this is noxious weeds in our surrounding areas. These are only the noxious weeds we enforce control on. These are one of our data maps that go into our annual report. And you can see it's the Gig Harbor area in Fox Island. Most of that is tansy. The green dots are poison hemlock. And so there's some light green too up there. And your light green squares are public rights of ways. And the red squares, where you see the red tansy squares, those are rights of ways, and the round ones are private. So as you can see, most of your infestations are in public, which means we've sent a lot of work orders to Department of Transportation and Pierce County Public Works, because that's their department. I just thought you guys might be interested in seeing that. Yeah. And I wish that I had the distribution list for Tacoma, because you guys would be so proud of yourselves. Because Tacoma's just, it looks like somebody just threw red ink on Tacoma. It's great.
So the red is tansy?
The red is tansy. And that's the most common one over here in the peninsula area.
That's not on the Southern Coast.
Here's your planting things. Where were the weeds? And when we say weed, I'm not just talking to you now about noxious weeds. I'm talking to you about anything you don't want on your properties or your public spaces. So even if you've got something growing that you don't want, like a buttercup, it's not even listed as a weed, that's one of those things. Where were they? You know, what do I want growing there instead? Do I need to do any additional ground treatments? Because sometimes, like with buttercup that likes low, flat, wet places, if you have a low, flat, wet place in your yard, the best thing to do with that is build it up and get rid of that low, flat, wet. Get the drainage good, because it likes swampy areas. So if you can make that drain better, and you can make it up higher, and you can plant, you'll be able to get rid of even buttercup, believe it or not. So those are your questions. Additional ground treatments. Do I need fabric? Mulching. Rock fill? Soil amendments. What's my pH? What's my nutritive value? Drainage. Wet, dry, well drained. So you can see, I've got our soil samples up there. And you can see what's wet, you can see what's dry, and you can see what's healthy down on the bottom. And if you've got worms, you're doing good. You're doing good. I'm guessing there's not a lot of worms in that top point. So, how can you help? Replace noxious weeds. Non-invasive native plants. We need them for our native habitats, our native wildlife, our bees, our pollinators, which are really important. If you see noxious weeds, on the back of, I'm going to cut right in front of this for a minute. On the back of most of our literature, and especially our Pierce County pamphlet, is our information. And I apologize right now that it's in such fine print. It's another eye test. You can also Google us if you don't want to try to read this. Google us. You can report a plant. You can report a weed on our website. You can call. It's usually me that answers the phone. Tell us where it's at. Give me really good directions if you're calling to report, let's say, a tansy infestation by the airport, just as you come off the bridge, because there's a big infestation there. You guys don't need to call about that one. It's been called about, trust me. But give me really good if you have an address, or if you have, when you say the airport right off of 16, give me really good directions so that I can send the inspector right to that spot. And then they will follow up with the caller if you have left a name and number. They'll follow up and let you know what's going on. Educate your friends and family. Things like this. Set up community stuff. Talk to each other about what's growing and what's not, what you've had luck with, especially when you're working on a community space. You know, open lines of communication is really good. And then consider volunteering. If you have time to volunteer, sometimes even volunteer organization like Washington Trails Association, Department of Natural Resources, sometimes they just need people that can make phone calls. So even if you go, well, I want to spend all my time working over here, but where can I help elsewhere without leaving my house? It can be done. And when you call and tell me where weeds are at, I consider you a volunteer. So thank you in advance for that. This is my contact information. I do have a few cards up here. I have a lot of pamphlets up here. And you can get a hold of me by just using the Pierce County Noxious Weed Control Board numbers and the website information. You'll find me. I'm pretty transparent. This is my list of references. Don't bother trying to read it. It's terrible font. I broke all of the presentation rules with this one. I have it in much bigger font on this piece of paper. And just really quickly, I'll tell you that I have pamphlets on knotweed, full circle, which is about integrated pest management and all of the different things that you can do. This is my two favorites would be that if you don't pick up anything else here today, nope, 3 favorites. Get a seed packet. They're wildflowers, they're native plants, they're non-invasive. I brought a bunch. Pierce County Noxious Weed Control Booklet. This is the weeds that we do designate control on. So if you are curious, you can flip it open, and the weed that you're looking for, we've got good enough pictures that you can usually find it by the image. If it's not in here, we probably don't designate enforcement on it. So that would be good news. So this is a really good little thing to have. You can throw it right down in the side pocket of your car. And the next one is Garden Wise. This is my all-time favorite book because it's a friendly book, and it talks about, up here it'll say invasive, don't buy this plant. And you usually get them from the nursery. And instead, buy one of these that says recommended alternative. So this is a great book. And I have enough, probably, I'll bet you I have enough for 2 for every person here. So if you want to take one and you want to gift one off to somebody else that you think would be interested, please do so. Take as much of the information as you like. I do have knotweed, English ivy, English holly, a lot of the troublesome weeds. I have pamphlets up here. So, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Anybody got anything? Nope. You can ask me afterwards too if it's just I don't want to be on camera. Thanks you guys very much.
I'd really like to see this become an ongoing conversation on the island. Not just today, but sharing with our friends, our neighbors, our problems and our successes. I'd like to see the successes mentioned because we know then people are attacking it and getting somewhere. So this is a good start today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us. Thanks for your time.